And they said it could not be done. But ladies and gentlemen, there is an intro with a video that worked and did not crash everything, every browser. And they said it could not be done. But ladies and So I've got close. I'm getting better. I'm getting closer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Wednesday night, another episode of Whisky Roundtable. If you're seeing deja vu, don't fret because, yes, we are doing Ian Schmidt twice in 2 weeks, given the fact that we stuffed up completely last week. So what we did after we had the audio issues, we went away. I spent about 24 hours on tech support, got new links, got new video files, all that sort of stuff. Come back with a heap of improvements. Turned out the main improvement that we've got tonight is no Matt Bailey. So that was the source of the problem, and that's what we're going to stick to. Matt can't join us tonight because he is down in Hobart somewhere drinking whiskey in people's houses, making an absolute nuisance of himself, I am sure. But we do have Ian Schmidt from the Tin Shed Distilling Co., founders of Iniquity Whisky, Alex Dahlenburg from Whisky Culture, and Andy Milne from South Trade. Ladies and gentlemen, how are we? What's in our glasses tonight?
Oh dear, I'm taking a bit of a break off the booze. I have cast strength burn from Sunday night.
And I reckon we should talk a little bit about Sunday night a little bit later on. I actually have just finished off a glass of the Single Malts of Scotland Linkwood, which I believe you had last week. Milne was in your glass at some point.
I got it again.
Yes.
It's so bloody good.
It is a very, very good whiskey.
I'm holding back on a very beautiful sample that's sitting on my desk, which I have already tried, but I will go back to again for this. But yes, I love Linkwood. You love Linkwood. It's the perfect thing to start with, and to ease the chest on what was a lot of very big and heavy whiskey of the weekend.
Well, I can't afford exotic whiskey, so I've got to drink my own stuff. There it is. there. The Solera. I think we're talking about it later on tonight. Yeah.
Yes, I have one sitting next to me, actually, and I think people will have as well, so we'll get on to that. G'day to everyone watching on the stream, and to Mark from the Wolfburn City, big daddy of the stream. It works, yes. It's only taken me 2.5 years to get it to work, but I'm glad that it does finally work. It's been quite a big week for whiskey. We had the inaugural Australian Whisky Awards, which we'll touch on a little bit later. A big day for Sydney, actually. Announcement that a lot of restrictions in terms of singing and dancing being the big ticket items are back again on Monday. Which
two of your favourites, Scott, right?
Yeah, it's good news for me. Absolutely terrible news for the rest of Sydney. Everyone's got some nice late licenses now. But Schmitty, we haven't heard as much about Adelaide as we have, say, Brisbane and Victoria in the past few, months. What's the situation down there at the moment? How are the bars going?
Bars are ticking along. They seem to be all right. The only one I really have close contact with is Haynes & Co., and their figures are up on pre-COVID. Bar occupancy rules are 1 person per 2 square metres, so bars are a little less crowded, but people seem to be spending more money when they go out, so everyone's winning. It's a more pleasant experience with less people in the bar, and the bars are kicking ass with lots of sales. Yeah. Other than that, it's pretty normal. Traffic's terrible. Peak traffic's as bad as it's ever been. I really enjoyed COVID lockdown because down here, alcoholic production was considered an essential service, and rightly so. So I'd be riding my push bike to work down the main street in the middle of peak hour traffic, and there'd be one other bloke on a bike out there. It was wonderful.
Apparently, and this is from statistics, not personal opinion, before my in-laws and the rest of Adelaide get on me, but apparently you do have the worst drivers in Australia.
Quite possibly, especially the ones who come from New South Wales and Victoria on holiday. It's not good down here. We have a special set of traffic lights in some parts of Adelaide that ring when they go green to wake the drivers up so they can put the foot on the accelerator. True story. Yeah.
I've got a few Adelaide jokes I think that we might be able to roll out throughout the next hour or so. That's an interesting, we've interviewed and been lucky enough to interview distillers and people from all over the world who've all had sort of different experiences during, the past 12 months. You were essentially business as usual on the production side, Schmitty?
Better than usual, actually, because just prior to COVID, we scored that really big order for the Whisky Club, and the cash flow from that kept us going most of the worst of COVID. And it didn't matter that the bars were closed because we had no whiskey left to sell anyway. So we were very fortunate at the time with that really massive sale. And as it turned out, it was such a big sale in that one short period of time that we managed to get and keep JobKeeper for every period thereafter, even though our sales have been fairly well unimpacted because we don't really do any selling to bars or bottle shops. It hasn't been historically a big market for us. We just have had all sell most of our product online.
Yeah. Do you want to take us through maybe the Tin Shed Distillery? It's obviously home to Iniquity whiskey, and there's a few batches to that, but it came out of the old Southern Coast distillery, which I know we touched upon briefly last week, but for those who weren't there, and for the sake of Scott being able to edit just one episode into the podcast and not have to put two together, do you want to tell us that story quickly?
Okay, Southern Coast Distillers was started by three partners and their wives. One of the partners wasn't pulling his weight, and we invited him to leave the party, and we even offered to buy him out and give him more money than he injected. He didn't think that was good enough and took us to court to try and get some more money. He didn't actually win that, but his parting gesture was to handball the whole thing to a liquidator. Section 461K, brackets 1 of the Corporations Act allows for directors to apply for the courts to apply a liquidator if they can't agree on what day of the week it is, which we couldn't. And that was not a pleasant experience dealing with a liquidator. I don't have much good things to say about them. I think they're the scum of the earth, frankly. Anyway, so the transition to Tin Shed Distilling was quite easy. We don't want to have anything to do with Southern Coast Distillers anymore if we can avoid it, because the name's full of some good memories, but a lot of bad ones because the association with a bloke called Anthony and Noel Fitzgerald, our other partner. So we're quite happy to start a new company, which we did. Brand new company. Everything's the same, basically, same equipment, same people, same recipes. Having said that, there is a difference in the spirit. We have a bigger still these days than we had at Southern Coast Distillers, and the original still gave us lots of flavours I used to describe as being like juicy fruit chewing gum, and the newer, bigger still gives us flavours like malt. And we thought, well, malt whiskey's supposed to taste like malt, so we'll go with that, and we do.
So with that, was everything that you sent across when you moved, was it everything but the stills that came with you, or did
we didn't move? We didn't move. I used to run a flagpole business, and the distillery started in a corner of the flagpole business, and we just got rid of that company and started a new company, same address. We purchased all the assets off the old company, so that went into the kitty that was grabbed by the greedy liquidator. So yeah, we spent money buying our own equipment back. But yeah, we didn't actually move physically, same building.
Oh.
The only thing that changed was the name above the door.
And Iniquity whiskey, which is the primary product of Tin Shed Distilling Co. That's been on the market, what, for now, 7 years?
I think we released our first one in 2015, so that makes it 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
6 years. And for someone who hasn't tried a lot of Iniquity whiskies, you know, that house style, like, is there a house style that you kind of think that permeates across all your products?
It seems to be toffee notes, herby notes, rich, deep mouthfeel, generally satisfying whiskies. We try to make them all different, but we're running out of variation. Having said that, we've just released a whiskey called Fluster Cluck. You have to be careful how you say that, especially if you're a peatophile, which is another word you've got to be careful to say because it's full of peat. We get our peat from a bloke called Peat, P-E-T-E, gives us the P-E-A-T from a place called Parawa. So we use Peat's peat from Parawa to make some of our whiskies. It's quite a mouthful. Forgot what I was saying now. Let me put my glasses on so I look more intelligent. Does that help?
Oh, yeah.
What was the question?
I believe you now. Whatever you're going to say next, I'm going to believe you now. I was going to write up everything you said previously.
Okay. Makes a difference, glasses.
But yeah, just in terms of like the house style and that sort of thing, I've tried a lot of the batches, and they do have that big toffee, and a lot of sherry and port and red wine casks have gone into it. How much has changed in the last 10 years or so from the start of Iniquity the start of Tin Shed to modern. Has much changed in terms of production or in raw ingredients or anything like that?
You wouldn't recognise the place from the last time you were down here. Have you ever been here, actually? Don't think you have.
Yeah, I've been to the flagpole site.
Okay, you wouldn't recognise it now. There's only one flagpole left. It's a timber one in the ceiling to be restored in my new house, which was built in 1860 something. So we need a flagpole to suit the house. And there's big fermenters everywhere, big stills, lots of things like chillers making noise all day long. I've just turned them off so I can have a conversation here. I'm in my office right now, actually, as opposed to my bedroom where you normally find me. So it has changed quite dramatically. I've gone up dramatically from producing a barrel a month of 100 litres. We now produce a 200 litre barrel a day. We filled 3 this morning. So it's quite different. In style of whiskey, it has become different. We've tried to make all the whiskies a little bit different, a bit more interesting to drink because we get bored drinking the same stuff all the time. But we've just produced this thing called our Solera whiskey, which is designed to be not so much a geeky whiskey, because you might describe our whiskies as being whiskey geek whiskies, because whiskey nerds like them, and they get all off on talking about the nose and the intricacies of the flavour and the finish. But there's a lot of people out there who don't like, there you go. There's a lot of blokes out there who don't like drinking like that. They just like to drink it with Coke or in a cocktail or with soda. And this Peat and Shiraz Solera we've just produced is designed to suit those people.
Yeah. So that whiskey is the one that you sort of put up before that we're referencing now.
Yep.
So this is meant to be, so this is going to become the new entry level, essentially. Am I reading that right?
Yep, you are. That's retailing around $95 a bottle around town. We haven't launched it yet, but our local distributor's got a hold of it and he's selling it faster than anything we've ever sold before. Don't ask me how that works, but it seems not releasing and not making a noise about a whiskey works better than when you do make a noise and do have a release and a function. Yeah.
Yeah, beauty.
So, I've got some tasting notes for that. We shot a video this afternoon.
Hold on, wait. You just gave us the whiskey that I don't have to worry about tasting notes for.
Well,
you said we ain't going to nerd out about it.
I want you to tell me what you think, and then I'll tell you what I think. Actually, I won't tell you what I think. That'll be rude.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the taste of it, peated malt or peat from Australia.
Yep.
Versus peat from Scotland.
Yep.
Let me guess, vastly different, Milne?
Well, of course. But I mean, I know I've tasted peated whiskies from mainland peat and from Isla peat, and they are worlds apart, and they have different sort of characteristics and stylistic sort of flavors in their style of peat. So with Australian peat, specific to where you're getting it from, what do you think what are they picking it up as a sort of character and flavor for yours?
Okay. Scottish peat it's all rotted vegetation basically, and in Scotland they've got pine needles and heather and sphagnum moss, and they've got deer shit and rabbit shit and all that sort of stuff. In Australia we've got mostly eucalyptus plants and kangaroo shit and possum shit, and the eucalyptus. Not really, no, not in your peat. No, it might be
not in your box.
But it tends to give us a sweeter product than you get out of Scotland. This Solera is quite smoky, and the Fluster Cluck even more so. But it tends to be a sweeter sort of peat because of the eucalyptus notes. And it's also lighter.
Do you get a greener, sort of fresher note from it, from that green sort of eucalypt character?
Or
is it more sweetness?
Have you got a sample?
Yeah.
Right here.
You tell me.
You've prompted a bit of a question there, Schmitty. I remember a few years back, it was either the gold label, which is sort of your premium. It was batch 1 or 2, and we tried a sample of it at about 18 months at one of the distillers' dinner in the back room opposite me here at the Oak Barrel. And it was sort of, it had lost all the smoke that it had at a 6 months old. And we were, back then a lot of Australian distillers were finding that, if you wanted to make a smoky whiskey, you needed to go and get Scottish barley and bring it over. How have you adapted since then to actually use local peat but actually keep it holding during the maturation?
Okay, that particular whiskey was Gold Batch 3, which is Alex's favourite whiskey and mine. And it did eventually get a little bit of something back, which was peat oriented, but it didn't actually come across as peat, but it had that background seasoning. Now, the method we use in Australia, we call the Lark Method, which is where you get basically bloody great big fish smoker, and you put your malt in there, and you put a cake tin on the bottom full of peat, and you put a gas fire underneath it, and you might spray a misty of water over the top of the barley to get it moist so it holds the smoke. And it's a very difficult thing to do to get that smoke into the finished product, because first of all, it doesn't all come through. There's just not as much smoke in the barley as there is in a fully smoked at the time of kilning from malting barley that you get out of Scotland. So you're pushing shit uphill because you don't have as much smoke. Then you finish up in a barrel, which we didn't know any better. We were using fortified barrels, port barrels, and it made a beautiful whiskey, but the peat just got gobbled up. So that Gold Batch 3 that I was telling Alex earlier, I used to hug every day and cuddle it because it was so nice. It started out so much peat in it that we thought we'd stuffed it up. We thought we'd outdone Octomore. It was really foul. But over 6 months, the peat got subdued. By 18 months, it was fantastic. At 20 months, there was no peat left. It tasted like shit. And we just put it away. And at just shy of 3 years, we had another crack at it and said, this is really nice. Let's bottle it now before it changes its mind again. So there is an issue getting the peat into it. And I know that Peter Bignell's smoked barrels, and we've done the same thing, try and get the smoke in there. But peat's what we use now, and we just do more of it. So we smoke it for days, if not weeks. Yeah, we just have to try harder. I don't see the point in buying in a Baird's peated malt. You might as well just buy a bottle of Ardbeg or a bottle of Lefroy. It's cheaper and easier. Besides, we're Australian. We've got the Peat's peat from Parawa, and we've even, the Fluster Cluck has got peat from the Highland Moors of Tasmania, collected pre-atomic age in 1932. Don't ask me how it came about, that I'm not supposed to tell you.
For the life of me, I don't know how you can just say Fluster Cluck so quickly without even thinking about it.
Practice. Fluster Cluck is actually a technical term from the flagpole industry. You've got to remember I made flagpoles for 37 years, so I'm very practiced at speaking the terminology in the flagpole industry.
Fluster Cluck, Fluster Fuck, Fluster Cluck.
Wait, now, hold on, Wes. I got it here. Alex swore, everyone take a drink.
She is.
So what does that mean in the flag industry? It's what we're all dying to know, clearly.
Well, we had a lot of erections, I can tell you that. Some of them quite large.
See, after 37 years in the
I have
industry,
whiskey on my nose.
I reckon that joke falls so flat at like flagpole functions.
It does, yeah.
They just love wheeling it out for people that aren't expecting it.
Yeah, well.
Or hoisting it out.
Yeah. So we did have a few flusters or cluck-ups in the fluster world. No, the flagpole world. You got me doing it now. Anyway, that's about peat. What else would you like to know?
Well, let's go back. So this new release, it's going to sit sub 100 on shelves. And there was a question that came through on the chat. For those who may not be familiar, your distributor, do they just do South Australia, or is there a Victorian one as well? Or
we do not have a Victorian distributor. We do the distribution ourselves, but up until now, it's been very difficult to sell our batch whiskies, the silver batches, which is sort of being replaced by the Anomaly series, because they're all different. And every time you go to someone like Nick's, they want to taste it again and get the sampling notes. It's a pain in the bum. So we just deal direct with our clientele online. And it's only now that we've got this fella, the consistent drop, that we can think about using distributors to sell it through grog shops.
Well, I know when I buy for our bars, I go straight through you to get it for us. So
you just like dealing with me, or
yeah, that's it. Straight direct.
Sweet.
I'd rather give you the cash, mate.
Oh, I thought it was something about my magnetic personality.
That too.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So go for it, Scotty. Sorry.
Go, Alex.
We are missing Matt Bailey terribly, not tonight. And I know I disappeared before, but he had a question that he popped in about what equipment and how did you find the transition from Southern Coast over to Tin Shed? Basically, what equipment went over and what have you got?
the whole lot went over, and the transition was easy. As I said, the only thing that changed was the name over the door. And in fact, we don't even have a name over the door, so even that didn't change. Most people who come to visit us can't find us, and I get phone calls like, "Where are you?" And I said, "Turn around and wave at me," because they're in the car park of a flagpole factory. They don't realise there's a distillery behind the door.
You mentioned though that your stills have been upgraded since the start of Tinged. So what have you got now? And did you just play with size? Did you try and replicate exactly the same shape?
No. We've got probably the shortest still in Australia for a 2,200 litre still. It's 2,200 litres because it's about as big as you can comfortably feed with electricity in a standard industrial small factory in South Australia. We get 100 amps of power in the door. We've got a roof covered in solar panels to feed it, and all it does is take the sharp edge off the bill. It doesn't really stop it. I've done it again. I forgot my question. I shouldn't have put my glasses on.
Still, what is your still look like?
Oh, right. It's short. And the reason it's short is because that's how much height we had from the mezzanine floor it sits onto the ceiling. So, we've got 2.2 metres or something, and I asked for the still to be made 2.15 metres tall. It's a really short, fat still. And we take relatively narrow cuts compared to the European producers.
Yeah. Are you tweaking that? I mean, you've been doing this a long time now, and even if people know the tin shed story, maybe not the southern coast, there's a lot more years than would read straight away. So, are you still tinkering with your spirit?
Oh yeah, all the time. And I've come to the conclusion it doesn't make a huge difference. We run the still fast, we run it slow, we run it hot, we run it cold. Not necessarily by choice, but just because it might be a 45-degree day. And I have actually run my still on a 45-degree day, recycling the condenser water just to prove I can do it. It was not pleasant, I can tell you. Standing on the upper floor next to the still was not a pleasant experience on a hot day. And we tend to do most of our distilling in winter, but we can now distill all year round. And we do tinker with things. Mostly we're trying to improve the yield. And I find that most of the tinkering we can do that makes any difference to whiskies in the barrel management. Barrel management is the real secret. We've got a huge palette of barrels. We've got champagne barrels, which have come along really nicely. Look out for those in a couple of years. We've got lots of bourbon barrels, Shiraz barrels, Chardonnay barrels, Pinot barrels, a few others I can't even remember. Port barrels, port season barrels, sherry barrels. And that's, so far, has been the secret to getting what is relatively young whiskey up to market and tasting okay, and picking up the odd gong here and there. Being able to blend is the real secret, and manage the barrels. And this Shiraz barrel, we've discovered, Shiraz barrels are cheap to buy, which is one of the reasons the whiskey's cheap, but they can be horrendous. 1 in 10 Shiraz barrels is just gorgeous. 9 out of 10 can be really nasty and rubbishy very, very quickly. So
expand on that. What do you mean nasty and rubbishy?
Too much tannin, too much astringency, just really unpleasant to drink. So the trick is to put them in the Shiraz barrels and extract the colour and the flavours that you want prior to it going unpleasant, or if it does go a bit unpleasant, knowing how to tweak it to make it come good again.
And what sort of time frame are you finding that
12 to 18 months. If we can look at a Shiraz barrel after 12 or 15 months, we'll know if it's going to be a really nice, yummy one, or if it's going to be something we want to do something with. And we've learnt the tricks of things to do to it to make something like that taste really good. So the trick is to identify it early, get it out of the Shiraz barrel, put it in a dead barrel, which is where the Solera system comes into it, because our Solera barrels are a mixture of fairly dead brandy barrels, 300 litres, and a whole bunch of 100-litre barrels that we used at Southern Coast, which are now pretty old. Some of them are 17 years old. And they don't contribute a real lot to flavour or extraction of colour, but they still manage to do the conversion where you wave your magic wand and it turns fire water into something smooth and easy to drink.
What are you doing with those barrels that, might put up some icky stuff?
The real sweet thing is that as second fills, they
Much
are
better.
Oh,
yeah,
they're marvellous. So you'd almost say the Solera is a product of making
Icky
really
barrel.
nice wine barrels for our second fill wine barrels. None of those are really ready for market yet, but all the signs are they're going to be superb.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay.
Thank you. It is, yeah.
Yeah, oh, I love it. So even if it's from Icky Barrels, you've done some amazing stuff with it. I really do love the Solera.
Oh, good. Thank you.
it's got all the hallmarks of what I associate with Iniquity, regardless of what barrel it's gone into. That, you know, that toffee and that sort of burnt caramel thing, but it's got that grit and that grunt. I've always found it to be quite a thick, muscular sort of whiskey, and you know, I think it's you know, probably one, if you had to say, you know, which distilleries do I want making peated whiskey in Australia, then Tinshed is definitely one of them, because they have that element built in.
They have a backbone that can stand up to it.
Somebody called James Finnegan's asked a question: how often do you taste the barrels? I've got a partner called Vic who's come to work full time with us in the last 2 months. He's a postman by trade. He's going back to the post next month, and then he's taken some long service leave to come back after that. But prior to that, I was working by myself, and I didn't get to taste the whiskies all that often. But since he's been here, about 9:30, 10 o'clock every morning, there's half a dozen samples of whiskey on my desk. So we get to taste them quite often, is the answer, James.
Do you mean he just comes through at 9:30 and 9:30, 10:30 on his postie route? Or?
Oh, no, he's been working for us full time, because he lives up in the hills about 45 minutes drive away, which incidentally is something I can announce. We are in the final stages of negotiating to change location at the end of the year. We'll be moving to the Adelaide Hills. Yeah, in a purpose-built distillery with cellar door and bar in a cluster of food and grog businesses.
Oof.
Next to a chocolate factory.
But please tell me you're not going to be running the cellar door, are you?
No, I haven't got a clue how to do that.
Someone with a smile. Question on just on the postie route thing there. I think every whiskey lover has a different relationship with postal services and couriers in terms of getting whiskey, and I think people who work in the industry have a very strong feeling about things going missing and getting broken. So what happens when a bottle of Tinshed Iniquity single malt whiskey leaves the distillery and goes missing or gets broken? Like what is that reaction from in-house there?
They're remarkably cynical, because Vic and his ex-wife Rose, who's also one of the shareholders, she used to work for Australia Post too, and they tell stories about how the stuff's handled. But we've been remarkably lucky. We've had 1 or 2 bottles go missing and 1 break in the last 5 or 6 years. In fact, even going back to Southern Coast days, we only had 1 breakage there as well. Alex, you had a question?
No, I was just going to say, how the hell do you manage that? We ship horns, like as in drinking horns, all around the world through our online merch business.
Yeah.
And somehow horns are getting broken. Books are getting broken. But you've only had a couple of breakages in your bottles.
Yeah, it's got a bit to do with packaging. I think it's got a lot to do with the Indian people who are driving all the delivery vans these days. They respect the no whiskey. They don't handle it too roughly.
True.
Did you know that the 4 biggest whiskey brands in the world are Indian?
Yeah.
Did you know that of the 4 biggest ones, the 3 biggest ones each do more than double the production volume of Jack Daniels? Staggering, isn't it?
And did you know that of one of those biggest brands?
Oh, here we go.
80% of what they sell is in Tetra Pak.
No, I didn't know that. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
So, and it's in different sizes. So it's not just one size, but 200, 500. I don't know what the other sizes are, but the majority, I think 80% of their total sales for Officer's Choice, I think it is.
That's the biggest brand, yeah.
That's kind of like the Australian version of having a goon sack or a goon cask.
Yeah.
But
let's do this.
But drinking cultures are different everywhere in the world, and the culture of drinking there is very much when you go out, you drink, and it's similar in Japan. You drink and you drink really heavily for an hour, 2 hours, and then you go home and you have dinner with your family. And so it's not a case of you spend the night out and it's a night out drinking. It's a case of I'm going out for a drink, I'm going hard, and you drink a very large amount of whiskey or other things in 2 hours, and then off you go home.
There was a period where whiskey in Japan was the most consumed drink until alcoholic drink. Beer overtook it and is now went in the future. But Yeah, I found that quite fascinating. There's whiskey as the biggest consumed alcoholic drink.
Yeah.
Question, because it's after 8 o'clock and we can take it downhill from here. How do you think Australia would feel about whiskey in Tetra Paks or goon sacks?
I don't think it'd go down very well.
I think it's awesome.
I think
never drink it that way, but
it would go down very well. It just wouldn't go down very well for the country. Maybe.
well, we're so proud about our goon casks.
I suppose they'd be small though. They wouldn't be big ones. They'd be little ones. They'd be very handy at the footy.
You're just spoiling the fun of it now, Ian.
They'd be
very
taxed.
expensive.
They'd be taxed to shit though. That's the problem. But we focus on. We're not focus on, but we've done a lot of small format and medium format packaging for that exact reason. That there is that desire for 200 ml and 50 ml and what we call pockets and wristies. You just touch the we won't go for that. But it's they're convenient packaging sizes for a quick one in the pocket before you get to the game.
Yeah, we do a little 200 ml bottle that is actually for during the game because it's glass. You can get through the metal detectors at Adelaide Oval quite comfortably, and it beats spending $13 for a lousy Jack Daniels and Coke.
Hey!
Hey, what?
Easy, Tiger. You don't talk about my Jack like that.
Yeah, but
everyone loves
Jack, Jim, Johnny, Jose. Don't do that.
Everyone loves a good overpriced mid-strength beer, don't they?
I think it's probably got more to do with the fact, just like Port Adelaide supporters and breaking the law, more than convenience. I think it's
at least
probably...
they win footy games. They're playing the Swans this weekend, aren't they?
Guys, we made it 33 minutes without football. All right, I'm taking this to Proust or Proust.
No, I got one more before we kick into that.
Okay, go.
Which is Proustian-esque, but it is kind of probably will lead us to about 20 minutes of conversation. But it comes from Matt Bailey. Not my. We all kind of want to know this, but it comes from Matt Bailey, so I take no credit. But where do you see the Australian industry in the next 10 years? I mean, it's changed and developed a lot in the last 10, and there's been what was started very much in Tasmania and is now across the entire country. What are you seeing for this developing and growing in the next 10 years, and what do you think will be different?
That's tough. I think there's a fair bit of downward price pressure even now on whiskey producers. So I don't think we'll ever see Australian-produced whiskey as cheap as mass-produced Scottish whiskey, but we will see more comparable price for whiskey quality. I'd like to think now ours is priced similar to similar quality Scottish whiskies like a Balvenie 17 that we've been compared to. So that's the pricing pressure. The structure of the business, we're going to see some people get quite big and become mainstream players by Australian standards, not big by world standards. And we're going to see some people fall over in the mid-size. And I think the very small one-man bands will continue to flourish or not, depending on their own local market penetration. So I think we'll just see more and more of them. I'm lucky enough to be involved in talking to students in the Adelaide University's distillers course. They bring a course through every couple of months with 20 or 30 people in it. There seems to be an ever-increasing number of people wanting to get into distilling. That means there's going to be a lot more people starting distilleries. I don't know how many will survive, but there's a lot of people trying.
It's a really good point, Schmidt. I mean, you're what? You celebrate your 103rd birthday this year, I think. So
Don't be rude. It's 99.
Okay, so you had 99th birthday this year.
65th, actually.
Yeah. Are you?
I'm officially retired in a couple of months.
Yeah. But are you at the stage where, particularly when you move to Adelaide Hills, you're going to need stuff for cellar door and that sort of thing? Are you looking at potentially getting some help in the distillery? And what's the market like for distillers in Australia?
I think the market for destination distilleries is strong, especially in the Adelaide Hills here, where we're fairly unique. It's sort of like your Southern Highlands, but it's only 10 or 20 minutes up the road and no traffic lights. So the possibilities are almost endless for destination style locations. And that's what we will become, I hope. We won't be, or we will be seeking some serious professional help to set up a cellar door in a bar area, because we're not experienced in that at all. So we may even get a partner involved in that. We're looking for them, Alex. So yeah, we expect it to work for us. We expect that the one area of our business that wasn't impacted by COVID, because we don't have a cellar door, will suddenly appear and do wonders for our turnover and our profile.
You made a really interesting point about saying, we're not like Scotland and the big players there. And when I think about what backs that entire industry, it's blends, and they're always supported by blended whiskey. Do you see that happening in Australia? Do you see a market where distillers in Australia are providing someone? It doesn't have to be conglomerates like your Diageos and your Pernots, but do you see a market where a business can set up and be supplied with whiskey from you and creating blends from that?
Oh yeah, it's already happening. There's plenty of independent bottlers around, and more and more. Look at Tim
independent bottlers, but how much are they blending in? No one's been blending in grain, as far as I know.
I have it on good authority that a couple of Tasmanian players are moving into that space. I'll use no names because I don't fancy legal cases, but it's my understanding that that's in the process of happening. But it takes a while, as everything does with whiskey.
Yeah.
So if I had the idea today, I think we're going to make a blend, it would probably take me 3 years minimum to get that up and running.
And do you see that as something that will be a longevity thing for Australia, or do you think that will be a tough challenge?
No, I don't think it'll be tough at all. The only reason that we're doing single malts and what we are doing at the moment is just because we're so small, and we're just aiming at the whiskey nerds, and the whiskey nerds are the only people who can afford the product, frankly, or are prepared to pay for it. So there's a large 98% of the market is in that lower bracket where they don't want to spend so much money.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that realistically is blend.
That's probably not clear. In terms of output for distilleries, most distilleries are not outputting enough to actually maintain an ability to supply for blends.
Yes and no. No, you're dead right at the moment. I mean, there are a few notable exceptions. Lime Burners has got plenty of whiskey. There's a bloke called Coburn in Southern Highlands who... Mark has a fair bit of whiskey that he didn't make, but he's setting up to make his own. Star would make a fair bit, but if they wanted to make more, all they could do is buy the kit. And as I say to people, if I want to double my production, I don't double my hours and double my staff. I just double the size of my equipment. It's really making lots of whiskey is a no-brainer. The first whiskey distillery I ever attended or visited in Scotland had a staff of 7. 2 people made the 1.5 million litres a year they produced. The other 5 looked after tourists. There's reasonable sized distilleries for Australian standards who are running with 40 and 50 employees. I'm stuffed if I know what they do. I really am. We produce as much as the average distillery here in Australia, of our size, and I do it by myself. Why do you need cast of thousands? So there's no reason why you can't make 10 times the amount of whiskey as an output that any distillery does now. You just need bigger kit and deeper pockets.
That's it.
Good question coming through from Craig Merson on the chat here, and it touches on a little bit what we spoke about before in the terms of you're still tweaking your spirit, but where your real focus is in terms of innovation is in the cask management. There's a lot of newer distillers that will come through that are not as established as you, that are talking a lot about distilling process and barley types and fermentation, methods and that sort of thing. Do you feel that Australian distillers are focusing more on the spirit or focusing more on the barrel? And in your experience, was that something that changed over the past 10 years?
Yep. We came to the game believing, as everyone else did, that different barleys will make a world of difference. But when you taste all the different varieties, and I've tasted 30 or 40, they all taste pretty similar, quite frankly.
Ooh.
At least all the ones that I've had to get. Maybe that's just because my palate's stuffed from drinking whiskey. I don't know. But there's not a huge variation in the flavour of the barley. But when you get to what comes out of a barrel, there is a huge variation. And we're starting to believe it's not so much based on what was in the barrel, unless it's an extreme thing like a Shiraz, but more about the cooper who made the barrel and where he got his timber from. We've bought a lot of wine casks. Most of the wine casks are French. They're either French oak or American oak. But when you go through the different categories of the different coopers in France who made the barrels, it's easy to see, the D&J barrels always turn out a good product and some others don't. And so we tend to now buy second-hand barrels that are all D&J. I can't remember I can't even pronounce that or spell it, but there's a French name that's 2 words, D&J, and they are really good coopers. We like their barrels. They give good results. So the forest that the cooper chooses, as well as the cooper's ability to make a nice barrel, are probably just as important as the stuff that was in the barrel.
Yeah,
Okay.
fascinating.
Yeah. You're all staggered by that, I can see. You're dumbfounded, speechless.
No, I think I would disagree a little bit. I've definitely tried some styles of maybe extreme barleys that have tasted very differently. And I still think that a distillery like Corowa, for example, that use very local barley from that region, their new make and their early whiskies had a note that was very different to things that I've tried, and they've, I think, learned to work with that, and they're improving all the time. So yeah, but I think it's interesting. Like a lot of these distilleries that I talked about this though have been going for 5 years, and so they're still learning. So it's interesting to hear your point of view, because you've been distilling for 17 years now, haven't you?
Yeah, and we're still learning. Actually, longer than that, but 17 will do.
But think about Scotland; they all get their barley from the same place, and it's all mass done.
Yeah, mass produced, but there are differences in the flavours of the barleys, to be sure, but they're not huge. And by the time you go through mashing, fermenting, distilling a couple of times, the new make spirit nearly always comes out pretty close to the same. And even when the new make spirit is different, the product coming out of the barrel 3 years' time is the difference due to the new make, or is the difference due to the barrel? It's bloody hard to know.
Very true.
Very true. Just before we get on to the final the final Proust questions. A question coming in from Mark at the Wolfburn Distillery. Speaking of destination distilleries, right in Thurso in the top of Scotland there.
I've been there.
Oh, you've been to Wolfburn?
No, I've been to Thurso.
Okay. When you're relocating, is there one part of the process you will change? Are you going from a Swegris topper to a round one, etc.? Are you going to try and just pick it up and place it into a new distillery?
We're going to pick it up and rearrange it slightly and put it down in the new distillery and just keep on going as we are. Hopefully we'll be more efficient the way it's laid out. It'll be cleaner, it'll be safer, there'll be less things to trip over, and it'll be a more even flow. Everything we've got in this distillery is on wheels except for the still and the mash. The still's the only thing not on wheels because it's too heavy to move, but everything else is on wheels. So we've tried realigning everything in the factory and moving it different places and doing different processes. We've evolved to be what we are, and it works reasonably well. And we'll just pick it up and move it up to the Adelaide Hills. It will be different up there though because it's quite a bit cooler, quite a bit more humid. So I'm expecting to see some sort of change in the product. Yeah.
And just a comment coming through here again from Craig Merson.
That's a brilliant one too.
Yeah, currently feel that Scotland make a spirit and the barrel complements that spirit. I feel like that Australia makes a spirit and then relies on the barrel. This makes it harder to construct a standout blend in Australia. And I think there's certainly some truths to that. But I think that comes with experience. Like probably, Schmitty, you're more confident in your barrel selections now than you would have been a decade ago.
Yeah. Not only the selection, but how we manage them.
I also
We're not
think
afraid to take something out of a barrel and put it in a different barrel.
I also
Quite
think
happy
that access to barrels is very different between Scotland and Australia.
Yeah, I was looking at that comment and thinking, yeah, but most of the barrels they use in Scotland aren't anywhere near as powerful as the barrels we use here. I use the word powerful carefully because what I'm saying is that when you use a second or third fill bourbon barrel or port or sherry barrel, it doesn't have anything like the same amount of grunt that the first fill has. And you've only got to look at the vast array of Australian whiskies that are out there that have been aged in port barrels that have been too small or they've just been too aggressive. And one of the reasons our whiskies taste so good and have so much extraction of colour and flavour is because the barrels are relatively young. I was in Lagavulin couple of years ago in the barrel store, and a little guy called Ian McDonald, I think his name was. We were talking about barrels and ages, and he said, "Oh, you seem to know a bit about whiskey." And I said, "Oh, I've got an interest in a distillery in Australia." And he said, "Oh, you want to try something more special then?" And he took me over and gave me a 35-year-old stuff. And he said, "Oh, by the way, how old do you think this barrel is?" I said, "I don't know, 40 years." And he said, "It's 140 years old."
Oh.
They have been using it continuously for 140 years old, which harks us right back to where we started, talking about peated whiskies. When you look at those Isle of peated whiskies, they're usually very pale, straw-coloured, almost clear. It's because they go in dead barrels. Because if you use a live barrel, such as we did with that Batch 3 gold label, it just gobbles up the peat. So you can't make an hard bed whiskey with fresh new barrels. You've got to use old tied ones.
I think that ties into to give a plug on the man above me, but Scotty talking about liquid earlier on today on his little Facebook page that is the Oak Barrel. But he was talking about it and saying how, in Australia we favour big, heavy sherry. We talk about sort of sherry and port and masala and dessert wine in terms of consumption and cask preference. And we like a dark whiskey and we like a heavy whiskey. And in Scotland, Scott and I have talked about this a lot. We love bourbon cask. Fresh, light, delicate whiskey. And Alex, sorry, I know I'm not discluding you from that conversation. It was more just Scott and I have really gone hard to geek out and frustrate about this. But we love that style. But it's a different thing with every market and every person. And it's if the majority of the people in your country are liking heavy, rich, full, big style whiskies, you're taking a pretty bold decision as a distiller to go, do you know what? Screw the rest of the country. Let's go all ex-bourbon, 200-litre casks, and they'll deal with it. And so it doesn't work like that. And it's a poor business decision to dive straight into that. But I do feel that, it's a fair but harsh. Yeah, and Craig, I love you, but it's a fair and harsh comment from Craig that yes, a lot of Scotch whiskey goes into that ex-bourbon, and I'm a big lover of that style of cask, but at the same time, that's what the market demands and that's what the market wants. So, what is the point in putting it into a different cask that other countries may absolutely love, but
it's also what we had. There weren't a lot of ex-bourbon casks in the country. There was no reason for them to be here.
That's it. Also, we didn't have huge access to them.
Look, when we started making whiskey, I went and visited Bill Lark and Patrick Maguire, and I tasted their whiskey and I thought, well, the smart thing is to do everything they're doing the same because there's less chance of stuffing it up. So we tried to do that. I even look a bit like Bill, I'm told. I don't cast quite as impressive a shadow as Bill does, but sorry, Bill.
Happy birthday, Bill.
But we started out doing that and we finished up buying the same barrels, but whoever made the barrels thought we were selling to a pup, and we finished up with dead barrels. So the dead barrels made older whiskey, but through our evolution of barrel management, we've accidentally filled some bourbon barrels a couple of years ago because we were concentrating on fortifieds because that's what Bill did and everybody else did. The bourbon barrels we bought because we couldn't buy any port barrels one week, and it turned out they were pretty good. They got used in that bottle I can see behind you there, Alex, with the red cap, the red wax on it. And we've subsequently filled quite a few bourbon barrels, and our fresh bourbon barrels we buy from Heaven Hill, and they are worlds apart from the bourbon barrels you get out of Scotland. If you ever get a chance to have that Fluster Cluck that we released a week or so back, you get an initial hit of smoke, but after that you get an explosion of tropical fruit flavours, unlike anything I've ever tasted in a bourbon barrel out of Scotland.
Mm.
I'm going to have to have it. I just want it.
I've lost all the sound.
Oh.
I've lost the sound.
Lost your sound. His headphones have done it again. I think we've found out what the issue is with the sound on some of these streams. But before we get on, I did stop Ian from reading out his tasting notes, so maybe we should just quickly give a few of our own for the upcoming
Shit.
Are we back?
Excuse me, Peter Shiraz still there?
We can hear you.
Well, yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you hear us?
I can tell you what did it for me. If you just go to the settings and change it back to your headphones, it works.
No, my headphones went flat. I just plugged them in.
Oh. Mine did that earlier. Mine just changed. I was like, oh shit.
So did you want to read out your tasty notes for this whiskey that I very rudely interrupted for before? I'm getting a lot of that burnt caramel sort of toffee element through here. So,
It's like clove and it's clove and nutmeg and spice.
I'm marshmallows on a fire.
Okay, let's show 3 different palettes for the same drink because I get. I'll read them to you. Instant smoke campfire after rain. A hint of well-aged wine. Winter bush barbecue and smoky bacon on the nose. Palate. Gentle, round, full mouthfeel. Does that sound erotic for you? No? Okay.
All right,
Sweet smokiness.
SMWS here.
A little bit, yeah. I've been told my tasting notes are too boring. So here we go. Evidence of the Shiraz exposure with no astringency and some stone fruit flavours and orange finish. The finish is long and lingering and it gets bigger with time, which is kind of weird. And I found it was an extraordinarily well-balanced whiskey, which I would say because I made it, and that the smoke and wine dance a beautiful waltz on your tongue. Does that sound sufficiently single?
Jesus.
Too much for you?
I get the orange, definitely.
Okay. I didn't get marshmallows, I didn't get toffee either, which I often get in our whiskies, but...
No, I know back. I get less of that campfire thing that you two are talking about, and less. Like I find I get a lot of when there's a bit of bacon in things. It's huge for me.
Okay.
But I didn't get that huge like smoked meat thing, but yeah, you get it. Yeah, okay.
I get barbecue, but campfire barbecue, but on the sweeter side.
Irrespective of what you get out of it, I find it pretty pleasant.
I wouldn't. Oh no! Don't say that.
Yeah, it's what I would describe as quite drinkable. I've only touched this on the 2 nights that we've been doing this chat, last Wednesday and this Wednesday.
Oh, all right. I'm going to ask you a couple of little questions here. What's your idea of whiskey happiness?
Sitting on the side of a boat in Wineglass Bay in Tasmania, with an ugly southerly blowing overhead, all rugged up in warm clothes with a lovely smoky whiskey.
Erecting a flag.
No, not.
You had to just bring it phallic, didn't you?
Have you seen?
It's not phallic. It's flag related. It's fine.
Have you seen the bottling they did of our whiskey at the Boutique Whiskey Company?
Not yet.
No.
Okay, I'll dig it out. Stand by.
Oh, get it.
I'm going to share it. Actually, I've got it here very easily. If you,
He's got it there.
Simon McGorham, if you're watching.
Balls.
I was lucky enough that they generously sent me a bottle, actually 2 bottles. And there's the label. And you can see it's upside down because we're from the land down under. And I've got my cockatoo on my shoulder, who I haven't had for a few years, and a flag upside down with the Iniquity flag on it. You'd like that, Andy?
Cute.
I thought it was pretty cute. Yeah.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Okay.
What else?
have you tried it, Schmitty?
I made it. I haven't tried it since it arrived. I didn't want to open the bottle.
Yeah, okay, but no, because it's interesting. I've tried them, and I was having this discussion with Brian and Janice from Blackgate on the weekend that it's definitely a Blackgate, but it's a different take on it because the cask has been not re-racked, but the cask that have been chosen, the strength that's been bottled at is not necessarily Blackgate. So I'd be very interested to see if you do crack it at some point, what someone else's take on bottling your spirit feels like.
That will be an interesting experiment. I won't do it now, but I'll do it another night.
Yeah,
sure.
We might have to do a night where we go through all 8 of them.
Oh my God, I'd love to. I really want to try them all.
Yeah, so I have some plans in place for this.
Okay.
Alex, another question?
One of my favourites. What's your happiest whiskey memory?
One of my happiest whiskey memories would be very hard to actually nominate the first one, or the happiest, because there's so many. But
Way it should be.
oh shit, where do you start? Black Bowmore, 75-year-old Glenfarclas from 1953. Actually, that's a good one. I did a tour a couple of years ago of Glenfarclas with, oh shit, what's his name? The brand ambassador, Ian Schmidt.
Yep.
Is that it?
Yep.
And we went through the whole place, every nut, every bolt, every pipe. I found things that we've actually got here, like after coolers on our spirit pipe and stuff that I haven't seen anywhere else except at Glenfarclas. I saw this thing. I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's an after cooler for the spirit pipe." And I said, "I've got one exactly the same, but smaller." It was a magic moment. But we went to the barrel room. We had whiskies from about the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, and the 50s. And when we went for dinner at the Craigellachie Hotel, we had the price list there of the family casks, and we'd had 4,500 pounds worth of drams that afternoon. That was quite a fun memory. That was good.
They're a good family tonight, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And another one is the Whisky Club I'm a member of here in Adelaide has an annual dinner, and it's this weekend actually in Robe, where we get bucket list whiskies. We've had Black Bowmores, we've had 25-year-old Macallums, we've had 75-year-old Glenfarclas. That was quite interesting. It reminds me of Joanna Lumley, past her prime, but obviously very classy. Well, she's 70-something years old. She was better when she was 40 years old. And so was the whiskey, quite likely, but it was still a very classy whiskey. So that is this weekend. Why you got your heads?
It's gold. It's gold.
I didn't think it was funny, but anyway. So it starts with a lunch where you have crayfish for 30 people. And then you have these bucket list whiskies for dinner. And one of the ladies who comes to this dinner comes from Scotland every year, and she's written a book about it and published it. And the book features not the food or the people, it features the whiskies. So that's one of my fondest memories, the Robe whiskey dinner.
Okay. Awesome. One
That's on
more?
this weekend. One more what?
We got time for one more.
We've got time for one more. All right. Oh, which one?
Who is your hero in whiskey?
Yeah, I was going to do that
one. Bloody good question. You would have
Dean
to.
Drews said himself, so you're welcome to say yourself.
Who said that?
Dean Drews.
Oh, okay.
Corowa.
No, I'd say Bill Lark, because he has helped me and steered me along the right path. He's such a really nice bloke and personality, and he's just a lovely bloke, as well as being a wealth of knowledge and encouragement. Yeah, probably Bill. Young Bill, I call him.
Yeah. I was very lucky to be on the table with him at the Australian Whisky Awards on the weekend with himself and Lynn. It was a wonderful honour to sit there.
Yeah. It would have been. Sorry I couldn't make it, but we had a whisky event on here. We had 900 people at a place called Lot 100. It was actually a gin affair. And the difference between gin events and whisky events is quite stark. There were 900 people and 800 of them were young women, half drunk, which has its downside. There were a few whisky drinkers amongst them, and it was good to relate to them. But it's a lovely venue. If you ever get over here, you must go. It's delightful. Yeah.
Wonderful.
We're going to do a bit of a dedicated episode to the awards. I think we will tally up our predictions and see if we've got a winner across the panel, and maybe a bit of a look back on what we liked and what can be improved for next year. We'll do that in an upcoming episode. But what we can say tonight is it was bloody fun to sit in a room with other people, drinking whiskey, talking. I think everyone who went said it was a lot of fun. So, but we'll go deep into that in an upcoming episode.
I was disappointed not to see a nomination for senior sex symbol of the distilling industry.
Senior sex symbol
Of the distilling industry.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Can we make that happen next year, please?
Nico, get on that right now, Nico. Definitely, we'll definitely take your notes down. You reckon you're a shoe-in for that one, do you, Smitty?
Well, I reckon I've got the edge over Martin Pie.
Oh, wow. I love it.
I reckon we do that one not as pre-votes, but just live on stage, like the old bid for a night. Like, who wants to bid with a date with Ian Schmidt? Or Martin
That could be
Pie?
embarrassing.
Yeah.
Take my money.
I was thinking they might need to actually go minus. It's like who in the audience will accept $15 to have to sit with Ian Schmidt all night?
Yes! Just got tangled up. That was amazing, Smitty. Man of my own heart. That's all.
Well, you know his nickname's Sack, don't you? It's not
Gentle.
Scott, it's Sack. No, smart-ass kid.
Oh, I like that. Okay, yeah, that's good. We like that one. That's a good one. I was like, I don't know where this is going, but we are live.
Schmitty, thank you very much for your time and staying at the distillery, turning off a few callers and stuff so we could hear you and see you this time. You've made some excellent whiskey, and I love the way that the distillery's going. And if this Peated Shiraz Solera continues on that route, I think you're going to have some good years, but also some new fans that, as you say, the earlier releases may not have been on their radar. So, congrats. We look forward with bated breath to the move at the end of the year, and hopefully that all goes smoothly. But we will all be there for a launch drink, I reckon.
You'd be more than welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. It's been an absolute hoot.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will be back next week. Maybe Alex Dahlenburg is taking this place of Matt Bailey in Tasmania.
Yes. I have my birthday dinner to go to next Wednesday.
I will be exempt as well.
All right. We may not be back next week, but we'll be back at some point. And maybe we do a special on maybe not a Wednesday to get this awards wrapped up and that sort of stuff. We'll discuss that on the chat tonight, and then forget about it until the night before. But thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We will see you all very, very soon.
Have a good week, guys.
Love you guys. Cheers, gang.